talk to schools, talk to universities, to anybody that would listen.
I'd like to hear more about the process of your research and some of the breakthroughs you made in discovering details about your own past.
Year 2010, 65 years after liberation, really became my year of discovery. Lots of things happened that year. The first thing that happened was I was invited to the celebration at Bergen-Belsen. I was very reluctant to go there. But there was a strange feeling that I had when I was there, and that was of being at home. I've always felt strange and out of place in places, but there, with all the other survivors, I felt at home. And it was very comforting. I hadn't expected that. So that was one thing that happened there. The other thing that happened there was that I wanted to find out if anybody remembered me. So I walked around with a bib, saying where I'd been when, and a photograph of me. And as I was walking along, there was a man that came towards me, and he looked at my bib, and he said, "I remember you." And that was
I'll try to continue that. I'm sorry about the technical glitch we had.
came to Sweden and wanted to take 20 orphans to be adopted in the States. The Swedish authority sound more Israeli as opposed to old country. So that is why the name differs. Another coincidence that occurred that year was one evening when I was watching TV and I was flipping through the channels, rather bored. And I came across a documentary that the British had shot in Bergen-Belsen. And that documentary showed this. That was me. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. I had to immediately go and look for the photos of me when I was 4 years old. I sent copies of this to Hetty and to Kobe to make sure that I was right. And they confirmed it. So now I have pictures of me when I was 2.5 years old, getting my hair brushed. What are the odds of this happening? I'm interested in mathematics, so I was trying to figure that out. First of all, there were 60,000 people in Bergen-Belsen at that time. What are the chances of me being filmed? What are the chances of the documentary maker using this particular clip in their documentary? I mean, they had all sorts of footage because the British were using film for their own propaganda purposes and also for recording what was happening in Bergen-Belsen. And then what are the chances of me actually seeing this and recognizing myself? It just blows me away. The odds must be astronomical. But now I have film of me getting my hair brushed 4 days after liberation. Bergen-Belsen became a displaced persons camp, a DP camp after the war, and stayed that way for 5 years. My stay was only there a couple of months. A Dutch Red Cross nurse kept a scrapbook there. And afterwards, she gave that scrapbook to the Bergen-Belsen Museum. Among her collection was my displaced person registration card. And she also had test results from the TB tests that had been carried out. So I now have my DP card as well. The card was published in the catalog, in the Bergen-Belsen catalog. And on that same page as my card, in this catalog, was the registration card of a friend of mine here in Victoria that lived on the same block as I did. And I was just amazed when I saw that we were that close in Bergen-Belsen, and then years, decades afterwards, we ended up on the same block in Victoria. Serendipity? Who knows? Sweden had agreed to accept 9,000 refugees with a priority given to people that were sick and children. As a three-year-old with tuberculosis, I was among the first ones to be transferred to a Swedish hospital. Before surrendering the camp, the Nazis had destroyed all the records, so none of my records followed me to Sweden. The bureaucrats in Sweden realized that at some point I would need a birthday. So, depending on the documents that they invented, 2 more birthdays for me. Eventually settling on the one that is in my passport. Thus I have documents with 5 different birthdays. I stayed in Sweden for a year to recover from TB. First in a hospital and then for a short time in an orphanage. The Swedish record keeping was extraordinary. 60 years later, when they sent me my hospital records, I could follow my temperature on a specific days and also the number of bowel movements I had on that day. I'll spare you the details. Before the Swedish authorities allowed me to be adopted, there was more red tape. They wanted to ensure that I was an orphan. An Orthodox Jewish lady from New York came to Sweden and wanted to take 20 orphans to be adopted in the States. The Swedish authorities agreed to include me, but my 2 uncles, who had survived the war, refused to give their permission. So the boat sailed to New York without me. Had the adoption gone through, I may have ended up as an Orthodox American Jew. Or perhaps not. I was now 4 years old. A Finnish Jewish couple, Minna and son, Maslovat, came to Sweden wanting to adopt a girl or 2. Was it my blonde curly hair, or when I clung to Minna saying in German, "Das ist meine Mama," this is my mother, that they had decided to adopt me. I moved to Finland, where I grew up. That was when my name changed to Julius Maslovat.
What was life like after liberation?
After that, my life changed considerably. I couldn't have asked for better parents. They were caring, patient, and provided me with everything I possibly could want. Then at 14, I went to England to a boarding school. a very good boarding school. Continued there and then became an engineer. In 1966, I emigrated to Canada. Got married in 1967, had 2 children, and now I enjoy a life of retirement and doing more or less what I want to be doing. To me, my early childhood is really like a jigsaw puzzle in that there are pieces scattered all over the place. And it has been a very interesting journey of trying to find the pieces and putting them together and making a whole story out of it. There's one big piece that is still missing, and that is I don't know what happened to my father. I know that he was transferred from Buchenwald to Frankfurt am Main about a month after I left. But I don't know where or how he died. He could have died in Frankfurt am Main, or on the death march back to Buchenwald, or on a transport from Buchenwald to Bergen-Belsen. On that transport, out of the 200 people in the cattle car, only 8 survived. Nietzsche has said, if you have a why to live, you can find a way to live. It's possible that because he was taking care of me, that was his why to live. And after I had left, his desire for life was gone. So I may have extended his life a little bit, I don't know. I may never have the answer to my question of why did I survive. Perhaps it was my blonde hair. Perhaps it was just straightforward luck. But I know that I wouldn't have survived as a toddler and as a baby without help from other people. Whether it was the people in the labor camp in Piotrków, my relatives then, whether it was my father in Buchenwald, the people definitely in Bergen-Belsen, Luba, Ermina, and Hetty, and tons of other people that I had no idea of. And those are the people that kept me alive. To me, they are all examples of how an ordinary person can become extraordinary. How one person can make a difference. But how can I thank my mother, who decided to throw me over the barbed wire fence against all her maternal instincts, because she had an intuition that she did not want me on the journey that she was going. And that is obviously a big part of why I survived. I'm not sure that I could do that if I was in her position. And of course I owe a huge gratitude to my adopted parents, Minna and Sam Maslovat, who gave me a good life of security and comfort. They enabled me to overcome my trauma and all the things that I had suffered, and to grow up without bitterness and hatred.
You have often been to Germany. After having experienced all this in the hands of the Germans, having your parents killed and all the suffering you saw, how do you feel about the Germans today?
Well, although the Nazis killed my parents, they killed them only because they were Jews. If I hated Germans of today only because they're Germans, I would be no better than the Nazis. And to me, that would be an indication that they won the war of instilling hatred in me. I will not do that. So, because the Germans of today, have no responsibility for what their parents or their grandparents did. To me, a person's religion or nationality or sexual orientation is completely irrelevant. Having received all this help, I feel that the only way I can show my gratitude is by talking about my experiences and helping people that are less fortunate than I am. As a Holocaust survivor, it is my duty to talk about it. There are very few of us left, and it has to be kept valid as long as possible. So I am involved with Holocaust studies, conferences, and I give talks in Canada, in the US, and Germany. So what can you do? Remember that World War II did not start with guns. It started with words, with bullying, and taking away people's rights. When you see that today, don't ignore it. Do something about it. Oppose it any way you can. Stop bullying, name-calling, laughing at racist or sexist jokes, or making fun of people because they look different than you do. Make friends with people that are different than you. Write letters when you see human rights being abused. Vote. Write articles. Don't be silent or indifferent when you see social injustices. Help people, whoever they are, whether they're children or whether they're adults, whether they're related to you or not. They are people just like you and me. To quote Albert Einstein, if I were to remain silent, I would be in complicity. Thank you for coming out and listening to me. Thank you for the questions that you had. And I hope that this session has been meaningful to you. Thank you very much.
I hope you don't mind if I unmask myself for the questions. I'll stay far behind, or far back here. Perhaps I should just give you a moment to gather your thoughts, and I will then try to answer your questions as best I can. Okay, I got the okay from Lyndon, so. Any questions?
How old were you actually when you were adopted by them?
I was. Okay, no, I won't use that one. I was 4 years old when. I was 4 years old when I was adopted. When I got to Sweden, I was 3, so I was about a year in Sweden to recuperate. In Denmark?
The people that adopted you, were they Danish?
No, they were Finnish,
Finnish?
from Finland. Yeah. The Danish people came in as prisoners to Buchenwald because they protested the German invasion of Denmark, and they were arrested and sent to Buchenwald. That's where the Danish connection comes in.
We've just got people joining us on the live stream, so we'll just get you to speak your question into the mic. Thanks.
Yes, the list you gave at the end of helpful things we could do, I couldn't hear quite a lot of it. Could you repeat those things?
Did I?
The list at the end of helpful things we might do.
I'm sorry, I've got problems hearing as well here, so.
Okay. The list you presented at the end
Right.
of helpful things we could all do.
Oh, right.
I missed so many of them. I'd
Okay,
love to hear it
one of
again.
the things that or perhaps the main thing is that don't ignore social injustices one way or another, whether it is ethnic or sexual jokes, whether it is the way people dress or look or color of the skin. Don't ignore it if you hear people slighted. And to me, that is a very important part of my whole talk, really, of activating people to do something about injustice, one way or another. For example, when I was very deeply moved and shocked, well, shocked isn't really the word that I should use here, of the magnitude of the injustices towards the First Nations. In 1966, I was in Finland and deciding where to move. And I wanted to move to an English-speaking country. So what are my options? The US, Canada, Australia, Britain, New Zealand. And by elimination, I didn't want to go to Australia because of their policy towards the Aboriginals and the immigration policy against the Chinese. I was very ignorant about the Canadian First Nations policy, but I came here, and I think that if I had known about it, I wouldn't have come here. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks so much for sharing your story. I think that's, feel very lucky to be here and to hear about your story, so thank you. I was curious to know if your adopted parents in Finland did they talk to you much, or did you talk to them very much about your experiences before they adopted you? Did you feel that that's something you could talk about with them?
Sure. The short answer is no, they didn't. It was a topic that was just not talked about. Partly I think it was that they didn't know what I had gone through. And the other part was that they didn't want to bring it up, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So it wasn't talked about at all. So really my research started in 2001. Now, the only other thing that I did get from my father, he was a lawyer, and he took care of all the legal parts of the adoption. So I had all that paperwork, which he gave me. And again, in 2000, I started looking at it. Not much before that. By then, they were dead. The other part is also that I felt that if I had started doing research before, when they were still alive, it would have been insulting to them. and that they would have sort of wondered, does he not like being here? Are we not good enough parents? And I didn't want to instill that sort of doubt in their minds. So no, we didn't talk about it at all. Yeah.
I have a similar question, but in reverse.
Okay.
So how did you talk about this story with your children? And at what age, and what was that like?
I said that I started researching in 2001. Before that, I actually had received an article about me in '82 from a magazine in New York, completely out of the blue. And it told a lot of the things that I have in the beginning of the video of my experiences in Piotrkov, and the sort of dates where I was in what camp, and information about my mother and my father. And I showed that to my children in '82. They would have been about early teens. And I have sort of showed them all the different discoveries as I've gone along. And I think they remember most of it. Also, I have given a talk in my daughter's kids' school, so my grandchildren know about it as well. And I've showed them this video as well.
Thank you for being here and speaking to us. I just have a couple of simple questions. It may have been in the video, I wasn't sure, but I didn't catch it. Was your adoptive parents, were they Jewish?
Were they?
Jewish?
Yes, they were.
They were Jewish.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yeah.
so they're the ones that renamed you then, were they? The ones that gave you the name that you have now?
Yes.
So why did they change your name from your original name?
Why did they send?
Why did they change your name from your original name to Julius?
Well, that was their name.
But
And
your first name?
it would have been very... Yidele actually is very similar to Julius. And I have a middle name as well, which is Idel. But I didn't like it.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So, on the birth certificate, actually, it's Joseph Idel. But I didn't like the connotation of IDEL, idol, or IDOL.
Yeah,
Didn't sit well with me.
yeah, I understand. One last thing. The fellow that was here in Victoria that lived, that you knew from, it was Buchenwald, right?
I didn't know him there. No, Bergen-Belsen.
Oh, Bergen-Belsen?
Yeah, I didn't know him there.
You didn't know him, but you were there with him. That's
We
how it
were at the
was?
same time there. He managed to become a roofer in Bergen-Belsen, and he wanted that because he couldn't be beaten when he was up on the roof.
Smart guy.
Unfortunately, he died about 5 years ago.
But you became friends here?
But
in Victoria?
here we got to know each other.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a question?
Would you tell us a bit about the Victoria Shoah project? The Victoria Shoah
right.
project, yeah.
I am a member of that as well, and I take part in their ceremonies, both the one at Kristallnacht in November and the Yom HaShoah usually in May. So I have spoken there, and I've participated in various different functions there. That one is a relatively new organization, but I find that their work is very worthwhile. There's another ceremony coming up in November again, and that will be on tape.
We're just getting one question in the chat, but just in the meantime, I was wondering what are your thoughts thinking about like more recent anti-Semitic movements that come up, whether on the island or in Canada, that sometimes seem to be scoffed at as not real or not serious because the numbers aren't as big in some places?
Unfortunately, there has been a history of anti-Semitism for a couple of thousand years. It hasn't gone away, and I doubt if it will go away. It is very disturbing, and I think what disturbs me even more is not just the anti-Semitism, but the anti-other, whether it is Muslims, or whether it is people from south of the border, or whether it is Asian population, or the First Nations. Any hatred of the other is disturbing to me. And again, I think that it is my duty and everybody else's duty to talk about it, to bring it up in the open. In all honesty, I must say that I have not met a Holocaust denier. And if I did, I think I would say to him, usually, let's go and have a coffee. I don't think I would convince him. I certainly know that he wouldn't convince me. But I think that a dialogue is necessary.
Thank you. A question from the chat. Mr. Maslovat, you've given many talks over the years. Do you see interest in your experiences and the Holocaust waning or staying at the same level? Any changes you observe?
Well, I may have gotten better at talking. I don't know. I hope so, anyway. In the audiences, no, I haven't really seen that bigger changes. I think I'm probably reaching a little bit bigger audience now with the DVD. I know that there is an organization in Finland that is putting subtitles on it and want to show it in schools. And I'm playing with the idea of doing the same thing in German and Polish and perhaps Hebrew. But that's sort of the next step in this. Because not everybody speaks English.
Any other questions? Oh, shall I just hand you the mic here?
Thank you. There was some talk about, that there aren't many survivors still alive. And I wonder, going into the future, when there won't be any, those of us that are still here, do you have any words of wisdom, how we can keep the memory and the lessons learned, perhaps, alive. I don't know if you have anything to share on that.
I think that it will be a problem in the future, no question about it. I think there have been studies made, for example, that the most effective way of getting across information and events of the Holocaust is this sort of group of face-to-face. And the least effective is a video. So there are problems keeping the memory of the Holocaust alive. But at the same time, we also have to remember that how much is kept alive about the Holocaust in Rwanda, or all the other Holocausts that have happened since then. We tend to forget, we tend not to know about them. And unfortunately, I think that will happen with the Holocaust as well. Our memories are very short, maximum 100 years. But atrocities continue. Yeah. And I don't know of any one method that would work, perhaps archival methods, perhaps continue writing about it, but that would be done by the second or third generation, and it doesn't have the same effect.
I'm curious about your views on intergenerational damage. We know that what happens to grandparents is passed on to their children and so on and so forth. And I just would like you to comment on that if you could.
Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't know that my grandchildren have suffered from it. That's my personal view of it. But I know of people that never really left the camp. And they lived to be 80 or so and suffered all their lives with the experiences that they've had. And not only did they suffer, but their children did as well. I haven't met their grandchildren, so I don't know what happened to them, but I know that the children suffered. And again, I think that I was very lucky that I was so young that I don't remember, I don't have the memory of the experiences. I only have the research that I found out about the experiences. Sure. But you're right that the trauma does continue.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot my question.
That's okay. It'll come to you.
So my background is German. I was born in East Germany in 1946.
Right.
And I find that the whole being German, having been German, I'm Canadian now, and reflecting on those times, I didn't know about the Holocaust until I was in university. I stumbled upon it by accident. Because the books that I was sitting next to were about the Holocaust. And I thought, what is this? It was shocking, totally shocking. I couldn't believe it. And I went through a lot of personal trauma about it. And I also find that for my parents, and it seems like that generation, it was very difficult to talk about it because there was so much shame associated with being German. I mean, we didn't do it. You know, my parents didn't do it, I didn't do it. But there is that collective shame. These are my people, and they did that. So I guess I don't really have a question there. I just,
Perhaps I can comment to that, saying that I have been to Germany a number of times, speaking to school-aged children there, and visited the different camps. And I have been treated with utmost respect. There was nothing that they wouldn't do for me while I was visiting. And I think that there are two sort of important events in the recent German history. One is the Holocaust, and the other one is the Berlin Wall. And those two events do not disappear from the German culture now. And I commend them for it. They have made a huge effort of educating the children about the Holocaust. In fact, I think it is compulsory for them to visit the camp.
Any last question before we wrap up? All right. Thank you very much, Julius Maslovat.
Thank you all for coming, and I want to apologize for the technical problems we had. I don't think you missed very much, but
That's right. Yeah, so I know I got to meet you one time at Fig Deli around the corner and chat, so I'm glad we could make this happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hmm.